All right. Hello, YouTube. It is Monday, May 24th. And I want to talk about something that I never thought I would probably talk about, which is UFOs. So, why UFOs? Right now, 6 months or so ago, Congress passed a spending bill that had tucked in some little corner a provision to be issued to the Pentagon that the Pentagon would reveal within 180 days, about 6 months, everything they know about UFOs. I can't even tell you whose idea it was to put that in there. It's been bouncing around for a long time. So now the Pentagon is under legal requirement to state everything they know about UFOs. And the report is coming out in a few days. And I've been noticing more chatter around the infosphere about this report coming out from the Pentagon. For whatever reason, I can imagine a few reasons, the Pentagon is not really issuing a report on UFOs, unidentified flying objects. They're actually going to issue a report on what they're calling unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs. All right. Now, I'm still going to call them UFOs because that's what everybody thinks of them as. Ooh, the Pentagon's going to issue their report on what they know about UFOs, Area 51, blah, blah, blah. Now, the changing in the wording is actually really important. They don't want to talk about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, because that's something of a loaded term. That means the thing you're looking at, while it might be unidentified to you, is flying and is an object. Unidentified flying objects. That's kind of what it implies. But from a rational scientific perspective, while it certainly is unidentified to you, you don't really know if it's flying. You don't really know if it's even an object. That, you got to be careful with words, especially when you're not sure what you're dealing with. Unidentified flying object implies something about the solution to the question that might actually not be in the solution set. The thing you're looking at might not be an object. The thing you're looking at might not be flying. I'll get to that in a moment. So they're calling it unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now that's a slightly bigger box than UFO. Unidentified flying object is fairly restrictive. So if you're going to answer the question of tell us everything you know about UFOs, okay? Some of the things they're going to want to reveal in their report may not be actually flying, and they might not be objects. Unidentified aerial phenomenon is more open. It allows for something to be an object, but it can also allow for something to be an illusion or I don't want to say a hallucination, because you can see things in your brain that actually aren't there. Okay, that's a little hard to imagine, but it's true. Your brain can perceive things that aren't in front of you, that your retinas aren't actually perceiving. Your brain in a box can perceive things as present that your retina did not translate from photons. We perceive a lot of things that aren't really there. So they're being a little more cagey with their wording. Good for them. I think they probably talked about this among themselves a lot. Okay, they're trying to unload UFO because these things may not be objects. They might not be in flight. Anyway, the report is coming out soon. And everyone is all like this about this report. They're all going to read it in minute detail. They're going to parse every sentence 7 different ways. Fine, everyone needs a hobby. Now, there's another parallel development here that has something to say about the solution space for what these UAPs are, what these UFOs might be. Okay, there's another area of study that places some limits on the solution space. How big is the solution? What can be included in all the space of solutions to the question, what are these UAPs? And that other area of study is a thought experiment that was launched by Enrico Fermi. And I actually hear, when did he do this? Now I need my glasses. When did he do this? It was back in the 50s, I think. He came up with this idea that, well, I'll just read it to you. It doesn't matter when he did it. Enrico Fermi, you can look him up. He came up with this thought experiment, which was that if there are and we've been studying the universe long enough to kind of know a little about it enough to pose a question of what are the chances of there being extraterrestrial life, off-planet, off-Earth life. And you may, if you're familiar with the Drake equation is that given there are this many billion sun-like stars in the galaxy, and sun-like stars should have this many planets, and there's a certain probability that some of those planets are Earth-like, and some of those Earth-like planets are going to have life, conditions for life, and they'll have life on them. Some of that life will become complex. Some of that complex life will become intelligent. Some of that intelligent, complex life will look to the stars and wonder. Some of that wondering life will develop technologies to communicate with the stars. And finally, how come we haven't heard from anybody? Where is everyone? And the Fermi Paradox is, simply stated, that if life should be, highly common in the galaxy and the universe, why are we not? Where is everybody? Why are we not hearing from them or seeing their signs in the universe? Where is everyone? And there's a cottage industry proposing solutions to the Fermi Paradox. We don't see them. Why? And some of those solutions are that the Drake equation is wrong. That there are not a lot of Earth-like planets. That's just a calculation. It's a guess. We don't really know, but maybe there aren't any. Another solution might be maybe complex life is really, really rare. Maybe life at all is extremely rare. And there are hundreds of solutions to the Fermi Paradox, some of which are combinations of solutions. They point to Earth as having its own turbulent past. There were several times when life on Earth was very nearly completely eradicated, like during the great what do they call it? The great oxygen poisoning event. Okay, and any one of the freezing events where the Earth completely froze over entirely, leaving nothing but a few volcanic vents with tiny amounts of life pocketed around it. If that's our own history, so who's to say that other planets that had life didn't have a similar history, and life was simply eradicated, completely gone. In any case, the whole study of the Fermi Paradox and all of the solutions to the Fermi Paradox, where is everyone? Okay, kind of has something to say about this UFO thing. People who study UFOs and UAPs kind of get out in the weeds a little bit, talking about, oh, well, the technology. I mean, we've developed a lot of technology. Our airplanes would look like amazing contraptions to people of 300 years ago, or even just 150 years ago. Modern people 150 years ago would have looked at our airplanes today and be absolutely shocked and amazed. But they probably wouldn't think of them as chariots of the gods or something. They would simply say, wow, there's a new machine. I wonder who built that, because they would have understood machines. But if you go far enough back, maybe even to Neanderthals, there's some point where there was no conception of machine. sharp sticks, rocks. That's all they got. Such that machine is an utterly alien concept. Such that flight, except in birds, is an absolutely alien concept. Where constructing machines, building things at all, other than sharpening a stick, is an absolutely alien concept. In which case, our aircraft would seem like absolute miracles to them. And so people say, well, these are flying machines. UFOs are flying machines, and they seem alien to us only because we don't understand machine like that. There are machines that are, familiar in our world, a mouse or a wristwatch or a cell phone, or anything, are as primitive as a Neanderthal's pointed stick. That our machines are nothing compared to these UFOs. And everything they do is as alien to us and phenomenal as, talking on a computer or talking on a phone or even, working metal with a hammer would be to a Neanderthal, right? And that's one explanation of why UFOs seem so strange. But I think if you're going to talk about their technology and how advanced they are and how primitive we are, and we're just Neanderthals and we're equivalent of, who are sharpening sticks while they are flying overhead in their contraptions, and we are completely lost and flummoxed. And if you're going to make that comparison, that's your explanation of why UFOs seem so strange to us, then you're going to have to deal with the Fermi Paradox. We look out into the cosmos and we see nothing. And there's lots of things we can look for, and we've been looking for a long time. Now, our planet leaks radio signals. We can't expect all advanced civilizations to leak radio signals. Our planet won't even be leaking radio signals 20, 30 years from now. There won't be any broadcast radio of any strength. Maybe your Bluetooth, again, the radio in your mouse communicates to your computer, but that's not going to even leave the room. Everything else on this planet, all communications will be via glass fibers, fiber optics, narrow band radio, focused lasers, that kind of thing. Starlink is going up into space. I think it uses all lasers now. Very narrowly focused lasers. Now, some of that can still leak out, but let's say that, here we are listening, doing our SETI research, listening on radio, and we're not hearing anybody. Well, someone listening on radio to try and hear us would have heard us from about the year, 1900 to about the year 2050, and then we're done. 150 years, and we were on air for 150 years, then we're gone. So maybe we won't detect life out there using radio. But there's other things we can do, and other things we've been doing. We've been looking at planets. Do we see any biosignatures? Do we see oxygen in the atmosphere? Do we see anything in the atmosphere that looks weird, ozone or chlorofluorocarbons or anything that is in our atmosphere that has no business being there? Well, who's to say that, oxygen is a staple for life on other planets? Who's to say that DNA is a staple on other planets? Who's to say that proteins even matter? We don't really know. But we don't hear anybody. We don't see anybody. And you're going to have to, if you're going to believe in UFOs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, then you're going to have to come up with an answer to the question, where is everybody? And if they can prevent us from seeing them in the cosmos, then what business do we have assuming we can see them on this planet? Okay, you say, well, if they're flying their vessel through the air, then we should be able to see them right there. But that's assuming that they're making vessels the way we would make vessels. What if they can travel completely through astral projection or something? In fact, one of the ideas I've been toying around with for a long time, I'm writing a book, and I want to talk about the book, but the character in my book is actually a projection. The character in my book is a projection. She's like an 8-dimensional creature, and her presence on Earth is you can only experience her as a projection. and interacting with her is part of the projection, but nothing more. So, you can imagine turning off the projection, she disappears. Well, she didn't disappear. She's still where she is, but her presence in our 3.5 dimensional reference frame is imposed and withdrawn and imposed and withdrawn. And she's not here. She's in some other dimensional space, and she's projected into our tiny, very limited, by her reference, very limited sphere of sensibility, things we can sense and comprehend and rationalize about. And it's fun to write about her being a projection. What does that feel like to her? How does that look to us? How can we interact with her? It's been a really interesting project. I've been working on this for about 10 years. And it has occurred to me in the past that these UFOs, these flying objects, if they exist at all, and given the Fermi Paradox, these UFOs may be neither objects nor in flight. Simple as that. They may not be aerial in any way at all. They may not even be present except in our minds. And that's given the Fermi Paradox, we don't see anything out there. We don't hear anything out there. There's no evidence of anything anywhere. We seem to be absolutely alone in the cosmos. And yet we have these aerial phenomena, these perceptions that something is going on. So given the overlap in these two areas of thought, one possibility is that these are projections into our space. And that's the only thing I can conceive of. I don't think there's anything flying around out there. I don't think anybody flew to our planet. I don't think anybody visited us on a mothership and there's a great big huge city-sized ship out there and it's sending down these little tiny little pods to fly around our atmosphere and play games with us. Doesn't make any sense. But the possibility that these are a projection from not even from another planet over a distance, where Albert Einstein reminds us constantly that there's a limit to how fast information can travel. And unless you're going to start supposing mathematical possibilities, which are nevertheless physically impossible, like wormholes or warps in space-time or Star Trek-y stuff, then you can't begin to imagine how craft can move from billions of light years away and travel billions of years to get to us in anything representing, classical time. And why would they be here? We've only been radio broadcasting for 100 years or so. How would they even know we were here? And when you go out 100 light years, what do you see? You don't see much. All right, you just don't see much. So where'd they come from? And I don't think we're ever going to answer this question of where are these craft coming from and how do they fly so fast and where are they out there in the cosmos? We don't see them. I don't think we're ever going to answer that question. Because we're really asking the wrong question. So I like to say there are no UFOs. It's ridiculous. It violates too many laws of physics. It's preposterous. Plus, we don't see anybody out there. But if it turns out there are UFOs, then the aliens are us. We're doing this. We're doing this to ourselves. One answer to the Fermi Paradox is that the reason why we don't see anyone in the cosmos is that, well, one, they're not out there. And two, they're somewhere else. They might be somewhere else. Maybe one of the first things that truly intelligent, spacefaring, races discover is multiple dimensions and either how to get there or how to use those for communications or how to use those for travel or something like that. It's possible. No, we don't have that going on right now for us, but it's possible that that's out there, and that it might even be that we are alone in the universe and there is nothing in the cosmos, and the aliens, so-called, that are visiting us are just projections of ourselves, maybe from the future, that we're it. It's not a very fun answer, right? It's not, ooh, aliens, UFOs, Mars attacks, that kind of thing. But frankly, it kind of follows from evidence, and it's the only thing that seems sane to me. That we are alone, and the only ones who would ever know we were here are us. Of course, we've been here all along. And the only ones who would ever be interested in visiting us would be ourselves. And the only ones who will probably ever come close to attaining the knowledge of mathematics and physics and energy and forces to deal with the existence of matter and energy at higher dimensions would be us. So I don't know. Maybe these aerial phenomena are not vessels at all, but projections of tools, the equivalent of telescopes, the equivalent of probes into our existence, our reality, possibly from some future, or possibly just from some other dimension. And you have to understand, the notion of future, us in the future, doesn't exist beyond 4 dimensions. If we ever become a multidimensional character, then time will be absolutely meaningless. It'll just be another dimension, like up, down, left, right, forward, backward, time. Okay, time for us is an arrow. We can only go forward in it. But if we become truly multidimensional, or some of our instruments do, then time will just be another two-way street. You can go forward, you can go backward. And if we go into 5 and 6 dimensional spaces, then even the 3 and 4 that we're currently existing with will become just trivial. In the same way that a flat piece of paper is or the flat screen on your cell phone is trivially simple. It's only 2 dimensions. You got up and down, and you can navigate into different pages. You can navigate your phone without any reference to time. You're in complete control of this 2-dimensional surface, and if given enough time, we might become transdimensional. So when you intersect UFOs and the Fermi Paradox, you kind of get to this point that sure, there might be UFOs, but if there are no UFOs, because these are not flying objects. They are not objects, and there's no flight involved. There's no physics of flight. They're not going anywhere. They're not using airfoils to travel through the air. They're not using anti-gravity to levitate. They're not flying. And you can think of them instead as probes, that they are being inserted into our reality from higher dimensional places. And if you allow that higher dimensions mean that time itself becomes simply another dimension, it's completely irrelevant in our thought space. Time becomes completely irrelevant. There is no arrow. There's no single direction for it. If we ever become like that, if time for us becomes just another road, if we ever or our instruments ever become multidimensional, and if we ever become curious about what we were doing back when, back in air quotes, okay, in some distant past, in air quotes, that some future us is interested in. Maybe they've discovered that there was a time, in air quotes, when humans didn't understand time, and we're stuck in it, and we're stuck in 3 or 4 dimensions. And some future of us isn't stuck and discovers us in our stuck place and comes looking for us. The way if you were gardening and you were in your garden and you were working in the dirt and you moved some dirt out of the way and you found a hatch going down into and you lift the hatch and there's a hole. What is this? And now you know something. Someone else has been here before you and they did some work, and there's a hole and there's a hatch and there's a ladder and it's going down. You're like, what is this? I thought I understood the world, but now I don't understand anything. And so maybe you go down that hole. You go down the ladder. And maybe some future version of us doesn't really even understand time, discovers us lost in some little cubby of their time. And when I'm dealing with UFOs and all these aerial phenomena and all these things jetting around, it frustrates me that we are stuck. We're kind of stuck where we are. We're stuck in a limited view of the world that scientists know is extremely narrow, very, very narrow, mathematically narrow. Our entire universe is probably the equivalent of the flat two-dimensional screen on a cell phone. Yes, you can go up and down, left and right, and you can click, and that's all you get. Our current reality is like the flat screen on a cell phone. And for someone else, it may not be. For us, after we have broken out of our two-dimensional space, for us, when time is no longer a limiting dimension, we might rediscover ourselves when we were Neanderthals, the equivalent thereof. Rediscover ourselves and say, is this our origin? Wait, is this where we started? That us, we are it. And the Fermi Paradox has a solution. And the solution is there's nobody else. It's all us. And that's sufficient. There are no UFOs. This is how I approach this. There are no UFOs. But if there are, then the aliens are us. And I think that's a real constructive way to look at it. And it means that when we start looking at these things and going out there, when we start going out there, what we're looking for, follow along here, what we're looking for is ourselves. And what we're going to find, what we are going to find, put on your science fiction hat, what we are going to find is the pathway that got us there so we could come back and haul us there. What we are going to discover is ourselves looking down the microscope at us. That's what we're going to discover. And as soon as we discover ourselves looking down the microscope barrel at us in the petri dish, is we're going to understand that there's a petri dish, there's a microscope, and there's an intelligence that's ourselves. Ourselves discovering ourselves through an instrument. That's the cool part about all of this. That's the serious part about all of this. This is not about little green men. This is not about weird physics. This is not about any of that. This is about the possibility, the very real contingent possibility that there are no UFOs. These are not flying objects. But if there are UFOs, they're us. And it's us rediscovering ourselves in this limited, weird, flat world. I want you to think about that. We are the aliens. We are. And maybe we're just about to make that journey. How about that? We are going to make that journey. How about that? And it's not a journey to Mars, and it's not a journey to the center of the earth. It's a different kind of journey. It's going from flatland, living on a petri dish, to whatever is beyond this, whatever is beyond 4 dimensions, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are various theories that could be as many as 10 dimensions, actual functioning dimensions. And when I was writing my book, where this character in the book, an important character in the book, is a projection, I had to think about how that would feel for her and how that would feel for us interacting with her. And the more I think about it, the more it feels like UFOs. And sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes when you're fiddling around with the edges of thought, you run into reality, because that's how it's done, you know. Sometimes when you're fiddling around with, what are shadows? How are shadows cast? The sun is there. There's an object here. There's a shadow on the ground. What's the relationship between these things? And then you discover, quite on accident, that the Earth is round. Oh, and by the way, you've just calculated its diameter and circumference, which the Greeks absolutely did, kind of on accident, noodling around with just what is all this. And sometimes you notice things. So, to summarize, there are no UFOs. There are no unidentified flying objects, because they're not objects and they're not flying. But if there are UFOs, then they are us. Anyway, I thought that was kind of fun. Hope you enjoy that. And when the Pentagon comes out with its paper, keep all that in mind as you're reading through all the endless, I don't know what they're going to come up with. Probably a lot of obfuscation. We don't know. We can't know. Maybe someday we'll know. Doesn't have to be a grand conspiracy. It could simply be that we haven't asked the right question. And that happens a lot.